guys, welcome back to the RevRx podcast, where we help you thrive in faith, family, and health. My name is Chad Potts, and I'm your host. Today's guest is someone I've wanted to bring on for a while, Jim Burns. You may recognize his name. He is the president of Homeward Ministries. He's the author of more than 20 books, but one in particular is going to be the focus of our talk today. It's called Doing Life with Your Adult Children. Keep Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out. Don't you love that subtitle? Here's the thing. If you find that you're a parent and you're having trouble navigating the relationship with your parents, or if you find that you're an older parent and raising kids was the easy part, now you're wondering, what's the best way for me to guide, support, and relate to my own grown children without overstepping? This episode's for you. We talk about boundaries, expectations, disappointment, and ultimately how to maintain a relationship with your adult kids while trusting God with their future. So let's dive in. Without further ado, I introduce to you my friend, Jim Burns. Jim Burns, what a pleasure it is to have you here on the show, brother. Thanks for joining us.
Chad, I'm excited. Plus, I told you before it started, I love your voice, the guitars. I was expecting you to sing some country music for me. You know, I'm a Southern California boy, and so I do the Beach Boys, but I was hoping for you to break out in song.
Well, maybe in a future episode, we'll get up the we'll get up the courage to do that later.
You got it. You got it.
I may have to write my own intro for my podcast. So.
That's it.
You're on the opposite coast, and we've had a lot of good conversation before this started, but there's so many questions I have for you, and I don't even know what to ask because we're just going to get into a conversation. We're going to see where God leads us, and I'm excited to talk about parenting. I'm excited to talk about the world that you're in. Before we get into that, can you just introduce yourself to our guest, help us to get to know you a little better?
Great. Well, my background is youth ministry, Chad, and so I worked with kids, and when I was 18, I felt called to do youth ministry, and that's what I did. And then as time got on, I went, wow, we're helping these kids, but the parents need a lot of help. And so I thought, boy, if we could just the parents would drop the kids off at church and we would have them and they'd go to brunch or whatever. And I go, wow, the kids should drop the parents off and we could help these parents. So I started writing on parenting and started speaking on parenting, and I've loved it. I mean, my heart is still with kids. I wake up in the morning going, how do you help kids? Mm. And the kids could be babies, or the kids could be the kids your kids' age, or right. Teens, or even adult children. But I figure the best way I can do that is by helping the parents and helping, even grandparents and helping that kind of thing. And so it's been a great joy. Homeward, I work for and with Homeward, the founder. We're 40 years old. Our excitement is 4 values: strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, healthy leaders. That's what we do. We've got a podcast of our own called Homeward with Jim Burns. I laugh at what a terrible title that is. It's, what does that mean? But and we talk about the 4 values. Joy for me. I'm actually in our studio today. When I do a podcast for somebody else, I'm not always in our studio, but I happen to be here today. Married to Kathy. We've been married 50 years. Wow. So it's a long time. We're old guys.
Congrats. Yeah.
Nobody ever thinks Kathy they think she's my daughter. It just drives me nuts. So I have a hat on, I guess. So, at least anybody who sees this on YouTube could see that I don't have any hair. I used to have hair when I married her. And we have 3 daughters, and they're adult daughters. The grandkids are the joy of my life. We've got 4 of them. And that's kind of our deal. I have lived in California all of my life, except for grad school. I went to Princeton in New Jersey, and then I went and did my PhD in England. And it really gave me a global feel of what goes on in families. And that's been very, very helpful. Yeah,
sure.
So we can go on and on, but that's it.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that helps kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about. But I'm with you on the bald head.
Uh-huh.
I've got a little bit still hanging on, and I shaved it. My little boy, my middle child, he's 6. He cried and cried and cried, and he said, "Daddy, I don't like the way you look," and so I let it grow back out a little bit.
Yeah,
can't be upsetting the kids too much. I'm sure you're probably right about that.
My girls said to me when they were like that, "I'm not going to marry somebody who's bald." But
makes you feel good, doesn't it?
My grandson, who's 9, James, he's named after me. He says I have bald hair, and he loves it. He thinks he gets good luck by rubbing my head. So there you go.
I love it. Yeah, and stages of life, and we're all in different places. We're all dealing with different things, but learning to find the joy where you are, I think, is a big part of this whole parenting journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mentioned to you, I'm kind of in the throes of it. I've got a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and 8-year-old, and so I've typically had guests on the show to talk about raising those kids. And I'm sure you have some thoughts there as well. But where I'd really like to talk about with you is something I've not delved into yet, because it's not the stage of life I'm in, or so I thought, but I am because I'm in the other side.
Sure, exactly.
Is parenting adult kids. So this parent-child relationship that happens as the child grows. And you've written a great book, Doing Life with Your Adult Children, and I love the subtitle. I told you this: Keeping Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out. And I think
they don't need to read the
lot.
book; they just need to do the subtitle, and it's going to work.
Yeah. You almost feel like you've got the gist of what's going on there from the subtitle.
Right.
But I love the teaching you're doing. I love the work that you're doing. You have some courses that are out there now on your website, and we can talk about where to go for that. But I want to start with this phrase, and I think this is one that I've kind of latched onto because I love it. There's this phrase, "You're fired." Right? Nobody likes to hear that. That leads to a sense of panic and anxiety sometimes, this sense of scarcity. But that phrase is one that you really talk about parents need to understand and kind of embrace in order to have a healthy relationship with your adult child. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, you and your wife and many of your listeners, they are in the throes of parenting, like you say. And so, they're doing it day to day. But, you put 2 decades into the life of those kids and you're day to day. So you're fired. You're still dad and you're still mom, but you're fired as a day to day parent. So we have to reinvent how we parent. And none of us are ever planned for that. Like, were you guys right now in the middle of it, man? You're working, day in and day out, just trying to get them to, get to a certain stage in life, which is, the next stage. And the next stage for you as they get older is going to be within the teen years, not even the adult. But when they become adults, we have to reinvent. And what's interesting about it is we don't know what we're doing and they don't know how to be an adult. So it tends to cause some tension, even in good homes, where they'll say, I had no idea that my, daughter was going to rebel in college. And rebel to them it's defined differently by each parent or by each kid. But so you're fired. I need to say to parents, look at what you did was awesome. You were controlling them at your kids' are age. So you control your kids from like 2 to 10 because you're in charge. I mean, in the best of ways of control. Then you kind of move to coaching. You're still in charge. Coaches are still in charge. And that's like, say, 13 to 15. And then 15 to 18, you're a consultant, meaning most of their day-to-day decisions are by them. That might freak you guys out at the age of your kids. But yeah, that's going to happen. Yeah. They're going to be away. They're going to spend more time away. They're going to be at school. They're going to be maybe get a job. They're going to start driving. There's going to be all these kind of things. And that's good because what I just said last night, I was speaking actually on a book I wrote called Confident Parenting. So it's a book for people who would have kids your age. And I said, your bottom line is to help your kids become responsible adults. And not just obedience, but it's really, how do you help them be responsible adults? You do that by giving them more freedom at a young age, obviously not tons of freedom. You're not going to say, hey, go to the beach, go on vacation, those kind of things.
We're going to leave you in the house by yourself.
Right. But with adults, you have to allow that to happen. And so it's really hard because I still want to give advice. I still want to fix it. I mean, I can remember my kids going, well, I'm an adult. And I go, yeah, but I'm paying for your college education. I'm paying for your cell phone. I'm paying for your insurance. But in their mind, they were now adults, but they really weren't acting exactly like adults. And we weren't really treating them exactly like we should or would have. So yeah, You're Fired is a great eye-opening experience. And it's better to read it in a book or have somebody tell you than realize, down the road in college or after college, you go, I think I've been fired, because they are going to fire us. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we just accepted it as part of our job description. And when we do that, I think we do a lot better. Yeah. You move the relationship from, like I said, control and, day to day to really more of a mentor type relationship. And if you can move that to a mentor, my girls, 2 of them have contacted me this morning already just for kind of mentoring type things. Not that they're going, hey, Dad, mentor me. It was more, hey, what would you do in this case? Or we're thinking about this. What do you think? And so one of them was on travel. So it's not like, I was their travel mentor or something. But, in a really neat way, it's kind of moved. And it took us 10 years to probably have that happen because we were bumping into each other and they were bumping into us. And we're like, why are they acting like this? And then all of a sudden, it kicked in. So parents have to understand they are fired of being a day-to-day parent.
Yeah. There reaches a time when that's no longer necessary. And I guess at some point you have to just kind of trust that you've prepared them the best you're able. And then, you hear this phrase and then put it in the Lord's hands. That's easier said than done, isn't it?
Which is hard. I mean, there's a sense of relinquishment. Like when you do that, you're relinquishing them to God, even in the midst of them making some poor decisions. But what I've learned about adult children is experience is a better teacher than advice. So sometimes and that's a case with your, 8-year-old. They're don't touch that. They touch it and and then that they learn. They're not going to do it again. Well, with adults, sometimes they have to make some poor choices. One of my daughters got herself in debt early. She got a credit card early 20s, and she was like buying all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm thinking, how is she doing that? Her job doesn't pay for all this. Well, then she got herself in debt. So it took her literally a couple of years. And she was going to grad school, and she decided she had to stop grad school to take care of this debt. Guess what? She's like the best steward of money now. We could have easily bailed her out. We could have written one check, said, hey, babe, here you go. We chose not to. And I'm so glad, because if we bail out our kids, then they're not going to become responsible adults, or they're not going to become responsible with money, or they're not going to become responsible with they have to move even in faith. They have to move to their own faith. My daughter, Christy, one time said, college senior, and she wrote a column in her paper, and she said, I had to disown my parents' faith to own my own faith. Well, that kind of freaked us out.
Yeah.
But in reality, she had been more imitating us.
Mm-hmm.
When she kind of disowned our faith, she had a little wandering there for a bit. And then when she came back, I mean, she was sitting next to me Sunday at church, worshiping. She's more involved in our church than Kathy and I are, and we're involved. It's kind of, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, but at the same time, they've got to own their own stuff. And parents struggle with it.
And that's something I see a good bit. So the role I'm in currently is young adult pastor, and that's kind of the college and career age.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of that, the deconstructing of the faith that they grew up with, and then the reconstructing of their own faith. And, I resonate with what she said, because that was me. I had to reach that point myself, and I was in my 20s and trying to figure out, what is this faith thing? For me, it was just going to church, and I knew there had to be more than that, but I was seeking, and thankfully we serve a God who continues to pursue us. Amen. And so that was where I found myself. And so now I'm committed to these young adults that are trying to go through that process, because so many times today, there is that deconstruction of their parents' faith, the mimicry that we're doing of what we grew up believing, what we grew up doing. But so many times we fall short of helping them through that reconstruction.
Yeah, you're right.
And realizing that that's a necessary part of adulthood, right?
No, you're right. I call it reformation. And, some people say, there's good deconstruction, bad deconstruction, because the word deconstruction is such a hot word right now. Yeah. I like that you're saying reconstruction. I don't think we use deconstruction for both, but it is. We have to, in some ways lose some of the trimmings from our own. I mean, my kids aren't going to become Christians based on what I say.
Yep.
Or what I do. They have to make that commitment on their own and deepen that commitment. It's like what happened with you, Chad. So yeah, we have to understand that as parents, and that's hard. I call it spiritual individuation. And there's a psychological term that says you have to kind of leave your parents, and Jesus talked about this, leave and cleave. You have to leave your parents to become your own person. But there's also a spiritual individuation that takes place where, they have to own their own faith. And once they do, hey, they're in good place. If they never do, or if we're just kind of hanging on to that, then really we're not helping them with their growth. So, what I say to parents all the time is, if they have doubts and questions, don't shame them. Like I had a kid not too long ago, 22 years old, friends of our friends, and said, hey, Jim, can you meet with him? He's got all these questions and you need to straighten them out. So he comes with him, and he tells me that his first question, he's like, okay, we're going. And he had a list of questions, and they were all the hardest theological questions you could ever imagine. None of us have easy answers. And the first one, I just paused for a long time, and I went, that's a question I've been thinking about since I became a Christian so many years ago.
Wow.
And he went, what? And I go, honestly, you can live, like he's looking at me as a spiritual leader in our church, leader in our ministry, things like that. And I said, that's a great question. I don't know. Now, if you want to read a book together on it, I actually have a book. I haven't read it, but I'll read the book with you, and maybe we can figure this thing out together. Or to be honest, there's certain things in life that we're just going to have to ask the Lord. I mean, I've got a list of questions for him once I get to heaven. And what he realized was that as he was going through this, he could have some doubts. He could have some questions. He didn't have to live exactly like his mom, who I love and adore. She's one of those women who just don't struggle with faith issues. She's like, I think she was born crying and praising God, and, it never changed.
Sanctified at birth.
Exactly. You're like, who are you? And the dad is also one of these guys, but he's really cut and dry, black and white. This is how it is. There's maybe 3 versions of how somebody would, look at something in scripture. And this guy is like, oh no, there's one. And here it is. Okay. This kid is being raised in a family like that. And he has normal
Makes sense.
things. So as a parent, and I said to them, you're going to have to let him deal with this and own it on his own. And you know what? He's still going to church. There's a lot of good. You're going to have to reframe this. You're all like freaked out because he has doubts. And I'm saying, no, wait, he's still going to church. He's still asking questions. He sees people who are Christians who are mentors for him in their 20s. You doing young adult ministry. All that's good. But he votes differently than you, which they were like more mad, I think, that he voted differently. And I understand. I mean, I think my daughter Christy and I think we cancel out our votes every time we vote. But that's not, the critical issue is, are they becoming responsible adults who love God?
That's good.
And there's not a lot we can do when they become adults except be a witness, love on them, stay in their messy story. Because a lot of it, like for me, 6 years ago, I wrote the book, Doing Life with Your Adult Children. I never dreamed that for the rest of my life, and I'm not kidding you, Chad, for the rest of my life, I get questions every day that are heartbreaking questions. My child is changing genders. My child is doing this. Today, it was 2 or 3 of them on leaving the faith and leaving God. And one was a grandma who was just told that she can't take the grandkids to church over the summer when they stay at grandma's, and she can't read them Bible stories and all this. These are heartbreaking things. And I'm not saying everyone is a heartbreaking story, but a lot of them are. But parent, I never dreamed I would be spending the rest of my life doing this. My focus has been with kids, your kids' age, with people Homeward, we focus on next generation parents. So our marriage conferences are focusing on younger marriages and, things like getting ready for marriage, first few years of marriage, that kind of stuff. But now I'm my own part of my own ministry is just dealing with this, and parents are struggling. That book has been out almost 6 years. It's still on the Amazon bestseller list.
Yeah.
There's a need.
You hit on something, right? One of the things you said that I love is staying in their messy story.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's maybe a tendency to panic when our kids have messy stories because we tend to think, okay, if I do this, then they're going to do this, and it's just going to be linear. They're going to find their way to success. They're going to love the Lord like I do, and everything will just work out happily ever after.
Right.
That's not usually how life goes.
No. Who stays in the mess? God. And he's kind of saying to us, I'm okay with messes. I live in messes. I've lived in your mess.
Yeah.
So I think we have to stay in the story. It's not the end. I tell people all the time, when you are looking at finances, how do you, accumulate good stewardship? It's by years of being faithful. And I think that's what happens in relationships with our adult children. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so, they may take a detour or two. They probably will, unfortunately. But we stay in the story. And we still be the important person in their life. I think I messed that up English-wise, but I write, I speak. But I think it's so key for us to stay in the messiness. And I call it the messy middle, because sometimes it's tough because I'm over here, my adult child is over here, and I just need to stay in the messy middle. And still, can I love them even if they have different beliefs, or if they're, choosing a different lifestyle, or they're choosing they don't like the church that they grew up in anymore because they thought it's too, just fill in the blank, too conservative, to this, to that, to whatever. You're living this dream because you're with young adults. What's funny is when I first wrote the book, Doing Life with Your Adult Children, I was at a conference with 4,500 people, and they make, the book just comes out, so they make a big deal about signing it. So that, Jim's going to be signing. There was this big long line, and young adults kept coming in holding this book. And I'd go, you can't be a parent of an adult, child. And they go, oh, no, it's for my mom. Can you say Claire, because it says, keep your mouth shut and then welcome it out. So she needs to learn to keep her mouth shut. We were talking about unsolicited advice is in my talk that day when they interviewed me, and we then, did the book signing, is I was talking about unsolicited advice is usually taken as criticism. And I'm getting amens for that. Usually, I get at Easter when you say Jesus rose from the dead, everybody goes, amen. But I'm going unsolicited, and I'm getting it from the young adults who are going, Mom and Dad, back off here.
And it's something that I think there needs to be education on both sides of that. And I think you bridge that gap well.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to do that. I'm really excited. I'm in the Ozarks at a university there in the Ozarks. I didn't even know there was a university in the Ozarks. I think it's called the University of the Ozarks. And I'm speaking to students, it's college, and I'm speaking to students on Friday, and I'm speaking to their parents on Saturday. Love
Nice.
that, because one of the things we have to do is build bridges with our adult children. Adult children need to build bridges with their parents too. They've got to be a little bit more patient and loving and kind to their parents, because their parents are kind of doing the best they can, and they don't know what they're doing, like I said, in terms of how to, now that we've got adult children, but the adult children, they're still learning too.
In every stage of life, it feels that way, doesn't it? We don't know what we're doing. This is the first time I've done this.
No, seriously. I mean, like, after I wrote Doing Life, I wrote a book called Finding Joy in the Empty Nest, because I was going to put it in a chapter for that other book, and it just my folder kept getting bigger. So Kathy and I move into the empty nest, and we kind of go, whoa, what happened? Marriage-wise, we're in a new stage. So we've put all of our energy into raising those kids, and they're out of the house, and it's a lot quiet now. And we put some things under the mat. Even in our own marriage, I write books on marriage. I speak on marriage. And yet what we realized was this was going to be a new phase.
Yes.
And I was missing the dirty towels on the floor and the food left open, on the stove. And all of a sudden I'm going, what is going on here? And Kathy is like, I need more time from you because I don't have the kids hanging around now. And I'm like, I'm going to change my lifestyle here a little bit. It was all good. But we do have to embrace each season.
Yes.
Just like, you guys have been through the diaper stage now. You're not wearing diapers, Chad, right? So everybody else is okay. Yeah. So you're through the diaper stage. Well, that's a stage. So you embraced that diaper stage going, oh my gosh, this is like the middle of the night, stuff. But now we're done with that stage, but there's the next stage, and you're just about ready to hit the teenage stage. And that is sometimes shocking as well.
Well, I tell everybody my 8-year-old daughter, she's the oldest, and I have 2 boys, but the oldest one's the girl. And I say to everybody, she's 8 going on 18.
Exactly. Sure. And we call that preteens.
Yeah.
We're calling 8, 9, 10 really the preteens these days. When I was in England and get my PhD a long time ago, it was the 80s, they actually had already changed the definition of adolescence from 13 to 18, which we were still saying in America. They had changed it from 10 to 24, using latent adolescence, or what we call emerging adulthood. And I thought they were a little wackadoo. I now agree with them 100%, that what your daughter is going through, again, she's 8, so she's on that young scale, but the preteen, we have to look at that in a different thing. I mean, I know we're talking about adult children today, but that's a new stage, because already at 8, 9, and definitely at 10, they're going through changes inside. Not so much, you don't see it as much outside. Hair may not be growing where hair is going to grow, or, their bodies aren't being shaped. It's just happening. But on the inside, there are things going. And because of the influence in so many homes with social media and all that, that's also kind of getting younger kids older too quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, and we could go there all the time. And I know we're talking about adult children, but again, that does play into the factor that some of these kids they experimented younger. So now they're adults and they're carrying some baggage into this stuff.
It's important to remember. I want to go into that area with you. We've talked about it several times, but the whole disagreeing with your child's life choices. Yeah. I get that a lot.
Yeah.
Particularly, I get that from older adults in my church whose children have come through youth group, and they now are straying from the church, or they vote differently now, or they're in college and they've gone to, whatever the case may be, fill in the blank. What is your advice for parents out there who realize that they disagree with the life choices of their children, whether it be faith, whether it be values, whatever the case is? Where's that balance between support and kind of enabling, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Well, you can accept someone in love. Jesus did this very well. You can accept someone in love and not agree with their choices. And so what I say to parents all the time is, do they know what you believe? Well, yes. Do they know how you feel? Well, yes. Then broaden the relationship, because again, you're in it, like I said, for the long haul. You stay in the story. And I laugh at this story because it's kind of a ridiculous story, but a son said to me, I am out of the relationship, told what he said to his dad, if you vote for Trump, I'm out of the relationship. I will not be in relationship. The dad said, if you don't vote for Trump, you're out of my will. Well, actually, both of those are not right things.
Right.
The son wasn't right. to do that. The dad wasn't right to do that. So we stay in it. So, you kind of smile and you say, you know what, I'm not in agreement with that, but I just want you to know I love you. I have a friend whose son's wife is now identifying as a guy. It is the craziest story. I mean, you hear this all the time because you're working with young adults. And he was telling me that at a special family event just not too long ago, he said, I sat them down and I said, I want you to know that I love you, period. And there is nothing you can do that will make me not love you. Now, there's some things that we disagree on, and we're going to probably have to agree to disagree on because I'm not going to change. Not sure if you're going to change, but here it is. I love you. And you know what? The person who was changing directions in terms of what they were going to be, they started to cry. Because what they were expecting from a very strong Christian dad, a person who was the vice president of a Christian college and things like that, they expected him to say, I shun you, you're wrong. Well, he did say you're wrong. He said, I don't believe the same way you believe. But he started with love. And I think Jesus did that, Chad.
Yeah.
Lead with love, practice kindness. Jesus did that. How he was able to do that with prostitutes and a tax collector in our day, we don't even think about how weird that is. But in that day, a tax collector was a bad guy. He was like a, really bad guy. It was Matthew. And Jesus never compromised what he believed. And at the same time, he showed love to them. So the thing that parents have to do, talk about staying in the messy middle, is they have to be able to be the safest support. In Doing Life with Your Adult Child, I talk about a guy who was actually a pastor. I don't say he was a pastor in the book, but his daughter had been dating a guy and then that didn't work out. And about 3 months later, she goes, Dad, are you sitting down? Yes, I'm at my desk at a very major church. You would know the church. And I'm going to get married to a 42-year-old. And he's like freaked out. She's 22 and it's a woman. And he was calling me to say, do I go to the wedding? And I go, that's only up to you. I said, here's what I would do. I would go. And I go, you're going to think and I would want to vomit and I'd be sad and all this. But the fact is a 22-year-old and a 42-year-old marrying, even if they were the opposite sex, that doesn't usually work. So if you're not there, not saying you are in agreement, but if you're not there, when she crashes, she's not going to come to you because you're not safe.
Right.
So how do you walk the line of showing love with these kids who are straying from faith, violating values galore, disagreeing with politics, whatever it might be? How do you do that? I think you stay in the relationship. So, okay, we're going to have to disagree to agree on that. Hey, look, in Rome, Georgia, they got a minor league baseball team. You want to go, and you go. See what I'm saying? You still keep in the relationship. And I think that's the safest way. So then when they have a need, they're going to come to mom and dad. If they don't, they're going to move farther away from you. You're going to push them out. So that's what parents need to hear.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so good on so many different levels. And what I love about that is that you bring up basically saying, all right, Jesus is our example of doing this perfectly. That Christ-likeness, that's what we're after.
Right. And the thing is he didn't compromise. So he wasn't going, I'm going to compromise. And I think what the tax collectors are doing is good, or what the prostitutes are doing is good, or what the woman he met at the well in terms of being caught in the middle of adultery was doing good. He said, no, go and sin no more. But he also showed grace. So as parents, you're showing grace to your kids every day with the age of your kids. They're so young. We show grace to our adult kids. That does not mean that we agree with everything that they do.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that looks different for every situation, but bringing it back to, hey, I'm aging myself a little bit. Do you remember the bracelets, the WWJD bracelets?
Sure.
I think that's the thing to do here. What would Jesus do? What would be his approach to this? And you get in the Word and you see that time and time again. The people he interacted with, there was this pursuit of them, but yet there was never a compromise.
Right.
And there was this love and grace, but there was never... It was never at the expense of the truth. No,
you're so right. And what's interesting about when we have to also be students of the culture to understand the students that you're working with as Gen Zers.
Yeah.
The latest Barna report says 4% of Gen Z. So that would be the younger, the people that you're working with as young adults. They could just be moving into millennials, but mainly they're Gen Z. That only 4% have a biblical worldview. So as parents, we can't be in some kind of shock because the students you're working with at your church might not agree with some of the things. Thomas Jefferson had his own Bible. a lot of people know this story, but he cut with, I don't know if it was scissors or a knife or I don't know what you had back in that day, but he cut parts of the Bible out to make it his own. Well, that's what we see with the people, with young adults. They don't have a problem as much with Jesus, but if they really heard what Jesus said, they wouldn't. They would have to decide. But what happens is they change moral values. Well, what are you going to do? If you change moral values or you have a lifestyle that's going against the scripture, you either come back or you change your belief system. So we've got a lot of young adults who are changing their belief system because they don't want to come back to those harsher words and that kind of lifestyle. So they just change their morality. See, and that's what we see happening. So I'm grateful for people like you who are working with this younger generation, because the people who are working with this younger generation but don't have kids in this generation, they've got to be able to have a lot of grace, and yet at the same time, as you were saying, not compromising our biblical views.
Yeah, and there's so many directions I want to go to that. But let's go back to this one, and we'll kind of wrap up a little bit. I could talk to you for hours. This is so good. Thinking about a big common issue I get from listeners, from parents, how to be the best parent across the miles. Yeah. Because a lot of, I told you my story. I'm about 4 hours from my parents, so we can drive and see each other on the weekends.
Yeah.
But it's just enough to where, distance can be an issue.
Right.
There's a lot of parents whose children are halfway across the world. And what's been your experience with that? It seems like, you're used to the children being with you all the time, like you can't go anywhere without them.
Sure.
And then now all of a sudden, not only are they out of the house, but now, thankfully we have the technology we have today, but there's some hurt there.
Sure.
What's your advice to those guys?
Well, it's a sense of loss. We have to make sure that we understand this. You'll understand this when your kids move out, but your parents went through a sense of loss. And, C.S. Lewis said, change is really hard on everybody, and change is loss. Sometimes there's good change, but it's still a sense of loss. So, Kathy and I, we have 2 daughters who live in Los Angeles. We live in Orange County, California, and we are bummed because they live an hour and 20 minutes away. Yeah. We want them to be our neighbors. The house goes up for sale next door. Could you come and move by us? We whisper to their kids, Dana Point's beautiful, blah, blah, blah. But we have to, first of all, embrace that the relationship is going to be different if it's farther away. Secondly, you brought it up. You said there is something called technology. Well, we always tend to, especially with people who have kids your age, we're dashing on creating a media safe home, and that's Homeward's biggest seminar. We're always talking about that kind of stuff. But we also have to say technology can be very good. There's this amazing thing that happened many years ago called the internet worldwide. Amazing, right? Yeah. Well, we're going to have to get on some FaceTime, and we're going to have to get on that and do that regularly. So, I've made it a habit of, even with my 4.5-year-old grandson, this is different than, with my kids as much, but, I'll do FaceTime with him. And I read him a story the other day. He was in bed, and I didn't realize he was going to be in bed that early. And so I said, can Papa Jay read you a story? And his mom goes, please. And so he's holding it, but he's also at 4.5, he's not even holding it good, right? So I can kind of see his face. And I read the story, and he just kept interacting with me as I read him. What I knew was at least when he comes to our house, is his favorite story. It's about a train. And so I read the story, and I felt kind of goofy doing it. And then today I get a note from my daughter that goes, ha, ha, ha. I was on a walk. His name is Huxley. I was on a walk with Huxley, and I said, do you want to move to Malibu? They're thinking about moving to another beach town up north. And he said, no, I want to move to Dana Point. I love Papa Jay. And I write back, I'm crying right now. And I was in the middle of doing some writing. I just go, I'm crying. Right now, I'm saying that my eyes just welled up with this.
That's cool.
But what I find is it's amazing what you can do in connection. I mean, you and I are across the country from each other, but even as we talked, we have a connection. Part of it's because I'm seeing your face. Back in the old day, I had a radio show, and if I did an interview on a telephone, I didn't have the connection that if the person was in the room or if the person now is on this. So with our kids, I think we can be long distance parents, but we still have to be engaged in their life. And I think it's really the job of the parents. I'll tell you that. I mean, I think it's great when the kids come and, I don't know if you said this, but I did this. I would go, I need to go see my parents. I haven't seen them for a while. I must go see them as if it's my responsibility. But I think it's also like with Kathy and I, we go, look at these people my kids are really busy because they've got, my daughter Christy has kids, your kids' age. And they're really busy. I know their life. So we need to go their way. We just had this conversation. We need to go their way. We need to, and make short runs. Even, it's 4 hours for your parents, but maybe they go, look at it. We're bringing some Chick-fil-A. Notice I pull in the Chick-fil-A because of Georgia. We're bringing some Chick-fil-A, and we want to hang out, but then we're going to go back and maybe they go get a motel room someplace, or whatever. If it works that they stay, how great that is. But you don't want, as parents of adult children, you want to be always aware of, the ins and outs and what's going on in the life of the adult child, their adult child, because their adult child is busy, and you don't want to just creep in and go, okay, we're moving in here for a while. We'd do that. Yeah. We'd all do that.
Right.
So I think we have to be careful with that. But again, when they're farther away, you stay in touch. You still be their biggest cheerleader on their birthdays. You still be the person who, when you put part of your vacation to go be with them and say, we want to spend the weekend with the kids so that you can go. And, like with us here locally, our Christy lives right by us. So they have date night once a week. And we said, hey, they weren't. We go, hey, on your date night, we'll watch the kids. And so part of the deal of their date night was they get to hand us the kids.
Yep.
We're thrilled.
Win-win.
They win because they get to, some time together, which they need.
Yeah. Love that. So helpful. And every bit of this is extremely helpful, not only just for those who have adult children, but for adult children. And like I said, you bridge that gap well.
Yeah. And some of these principles actually go with people who have younger kids, because again, those kids are going to become adults. So when you start thinking, I'm raising them to be responsible adults, well, that means, like I was talking last night at a seminar that I did, we were talking about sex education. We can have a conversation about that all day again. But I was saying, the more positive, value-centered sex education kids get from their parents, the less promiscuous and the less confused they'll be. And so I'm saying, yeah, at 8, you need to have these conversations, but you don't have the deeper conversations. My goodness, you wait till they're older. At young 5, you don't. But you still have the conversations because you want to be the safe person. So you're doing that partly so that when they become adults, they've made better decisions than other people are making right now. So we've got to have the awkward conversations. So that's what you do. You're preparing them at any age.
And realizing that you're raising them with a goal in mind. And I think that's helpful as well. What final piece of advice would you have for our listeners who they want to leave a legacy of faith, of love, of grace, of values for their children, for their grandchildren, for the generations to come? Sometimes it's easy to begin to kind of be focused on right here, right now. But then thinking about the legacy that we're leaving and tying all this together with parenting children and parenting adult children, what would be your words of advice to those that are wanting to leave that kind of legacy?
Finish well. You're on your own, because what's going to happen is they're watching you, and your words aren't as important as your actions. And so finish well. Do what it takes. I have a friend. His name is John Ortberg. Maybe you've heard of him. He's written lots of spiritual books and things like that. And
I like him.
He has a poster. He didn't make the poster, but it's a quote of his. And it says, love God and do the right thing. And last time I was with him, I go, hey, John, I changed your quote. He goes, you can't change my quote. That's like my one famous quote. I go, no, he actually has a lot of famous quotes. But he goes, that's my one famous quote. And I go, no, I changed it. Love God, do the right thing, repeat daily for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm trying to do with my grandkids is do that legacy, and I'm trying to do it with my own children. And the best thing I can do is love God, do the right thing, and then get up in the morning and do the same thing over and over again. Now, there are things to do. We could talk about that sometime in terms of, like James, I've read through the children's Bible with him 3 times. I didn't do that with my own kids. I mean, we read Chronicles of Narnia, and we read scripture. I mean, we did a lot of the things that parents would go, wow, we don't do that. We did it. But I'm much more focused on that with him. So like this summer, I'm speaking at a family conference for the whole week, and I'm bringing James. So my kids could come anytime, but I'm focused on, while we're there, James and I are going to read books, and Kathy's going to be with me, my wife, of course, and we're going to do all these different things with him, but they're kind of in a spiritual nature. As I get older, the older I get, the more I'm thinking about legacy. Games aren't won in the first half. They're won in the second half. You're in the first half right now, your life, Chad. And so, you have to build the foundation, do the right things. But in the second half, when you have adult children, the games are won in the second half. And so you finish well. Too many people aren't. And finish engaged with them too, where they know, gosh, I know they don't agree with me on how I vote, but they love me more than anybody else besides God. And, it's what you do.
This has been such a fun time. Love picking your brain a little bit and just having this conversation. I want my listeners to be able to find you and enter into your world, because you've got so many gifts and so many incredible resources out there. Can you tell them where to find you?
Yeah. Homeword.com, HOMEWORD.com. And pretty much you'll get the whole thing. I have a podcast. I do it weekly, Homeward with Jim Burns. It's all over the world on any platform. And I'm amazed at the privilege of who I get to talk to and whatnot. It's like, us having a conversation. It's like two people having a conversation at Starbucks, and, you're listening to them and you're listening in or whatever. Well, that's what this was like. And I get that privilege to do it too. And podcasting is great. We have lots of books and resources, lots of seminars. We're the largest provider of parenting seminars in the U.S. So it's not just me. People like Homeward could come to your church and do anything for helping kids at a very young age to helping, adult children, whatever. So it's a great ministry. Yeah. I just have become now, I still am full time, but I'm the founder, which I think means you're an old guy and we're going to put a new guy in to reach the next generation, who I love, this new guy.
Yeah.
And, I'm loving my role right now as more speaker, ambassador, writer, and I don't have to deal with all the, the finances of a nonprofit, ministry.
Even better.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, you're doing important work in the world, my friend.
Thank you.
And what a privilege this has been to sit down with you and bring this value to our audience. So, man, we need to do this again.
Okay.
We've got so many additional rabbit holes we could have gone down today.
Sure.
Maybe we'll save those for next time.
That'll be fun. Great to be with you, Chad. Honestly, great.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.